Welcome to the Fire and Earth podcast with your hosts, Jason Mefford and Kathy Groover. Fire and Earth, giving you the keys to unlock your limitless potential.
Welcome to another episode of the Fire and Earth podcast. I'm your co-host, Jason Mefford.
And I am Kathy Groover, and we are going to talk today about something we all face, decision making. And
Cue the scary music.
Oh, okay, I'll put that in the edit. We all face times where, what is the song? Should we stay or should we go now? Do we stay? Do we go? Do we say yes? Do we say no? Do we ask them out? Do we not ask them out? We were constantly every day faced with hundreds of decisions. What do we order for lunch? Which way do we drive to work? Do we go to work today? Do I call in sick? And we do get to a point where we have decision fatigue, which is why going to the grocery store at the end of the day is not always a good idea, because at that point you buy every cookie, cake, and candy that you want because you're decisioned out. You're just exhausted from making decisions all day. And the reason we're talking about this is I've had a couple clients in the last few weeks, coaching clients, who are really having trouble making decisions. One didn't know if she wanted to go back to her hometown with her girlfriend or if she wanted to stay here in Santa Barbara. And so we worked through that and had a couple really great tools to figure that out. So I thought we would talk about that today.
Yeah, I think that's good. And it's, there's different ways to make decisions as well, right? Because there's different tools, and you can talk about some of those that you share with people too. But there's also kind of what I kind of call like higher self decisions too, where you kind of check in with yourself intuitively as well. But we can talk a little bit about too, because I think especially when it's major life issues, we can do a lot of the 3D decision making, T accounts, advantages, disadvantages.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, we have to do what's in our highest and best interest as well.
Yeah.
And I know I've had several of those kinds of experiences this last year as well in my life where and sometimes the decision, which is kind of like what we just talked about on the previous episode we just recorded about control, is that a lot of times we want to control the timing of the decision too.
Right.
And sometimes we have to wait for the answer to come. And the waiting is the hardest part, Tom Petty sort of thing too. So, all right. So take us away. So how have you been helping your clients kind of come through this and make decisions?
Right. Well, I'm a huge list person. Quelle surprise. But one of the things I tend to ask my clients is I do a little big plus sign, and then it's, let's use the stay go thing, right? So what would the best things be of staying? What would the worst things be of staying? What would the best things be of going? What would the worst things be of going? And we write those out in those quadrants. We see sort of where the heaviness, what the heaviest quadrant is. We read them out loud, and I say, now that you've written that all down, what feels best to you? It's a great way for those linear decision making, because it illustrates in really clearly what it's pros and cons, but it takes it one step further. We used to call this Paris. I think this is called Paris window in hypnosis, when you kind of do these quadrant sort of things. So we went through that and we did that, and she looked them all over and she went, oh, it does sort of look like I'm leaning towards staying. And I said, and for your higher purpose, you're in a place, you're regenerating kind of yourself, you're rediscovering who you are. From what you've told me, it sounds to me like you're leaning towards staying. She said, yeah, but I still don't know. And then more excuses came, right? And so I handed her a quarter, and she goes, what? And I said, take the quarter. She goes, are you going to have me flip a coin? And I went, I'm going to have you flip a coin. Mm-hmm. And she goes, oh, and I seriously, flip it. Heads you stay, tails you go. And she goes, oh, I said, the heads you stay, tails you go. And she said, okay, heads I stay, tails I go. She flipped the coin and it landed, and she went, and I said, what is it? And she said, tails. I guess I'm going. And I said, how do you feel about that? She goes, I was really hoping it would be heads. I said, great. Well, then you have your answer.
Yeah. No,
you clearly want to stay. And she goes, oh, God, you're right. Yeah, I do.
Yep. Well, and because, again, I don't know the whole situation, but if she was kind of getting pressure to want to go, right? Because if the other person wants to go, but you want to stay, right? That ends up throwing a whole other kink into it. But I think that's a great example of kind of some easy work that we can do, because I
Yeah.
think this is one of those things too, with even, knowing what your higher self wants or what's in your best interest,
Hmm.
is we still have to do some work on our side too. It's not
Yep.
like, you can't be like, God, just tell me what to do. Send me some,
Send me a
big
sign.
sign and all, and it's like, no, go do the work, you know? And so I think that's an example of, and often we still get confused when we try to do that best thing, worst thing, kind
Yeah.
of a thing, because we can find issues on both ways. But then I love how you said, but what feels best,
Yeah.
right? Because at that point you're trying to check in with your higher self. And when I do that, I kind of ask myself questions silently in my head, right? And then I kind of feel into my body and see, how's my body feeling? Am I swaying one way or the
Yep.
other? Am I
Leaning into
getting,
it, pulling back. Yep.
yeah, am I getting the I get kind of this electrical tingling feeling sometimes. It usually is a confirmation of something.
Mhm.
And so it's just kind of playing with and asking the right questions in a way that it's kind of a yes or no, so I can kind of get a feel for it. But I love at the end where, again, she was so non-committal, and it's like, okay, well, flip a coin and let the coin decide for you.
Mhm.
And if you're relieved with the answer,
Yep.
then that's what you're supposed to do. If, like she did, she's like, oh, I was disappointed, I wanted it to be heads. Well, again, you have your
You just
answer.
answered your question.
Yeah, at that point.
Yep.
And so now you have the decision. Now you just got to, take the action and
Yeah.
kind of move on to it.
Yeah.
At
Yeah.
that point.
Then you actually have to, yeah, it's about the taking action. It's not just making the decision. Then you have to do something about that. You have to put those things in place to make that decision happen.
Mhm.
But it's just been interesting watching people over the last couple of weeks try to decide career choices and, the stay go thing and the should I go back to school situation and should I leave my husband situation? And, I had one woman, and this is where emotions can cloud things. I'm all about, I will validate your emotions all day. I've got the emotions wheel sitting in my office. I'll hand it to you. We'll talk about your emotions. But sometimes the emotional part of you gets in the way of, I don't want to say what should happen, but, this gal was in a very abusive relationship and we did the stay go quadrant. We flipped the damn coin. She still couldn't make the decision. And she finally said, okay, well, let's look at your needs. And we categorized it: emotional, physical, financial, sexual. We kind of broke it all down. And I said, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much are these being fulfilled by your partner? And when she saw that every single one was a 2, and
Ouch.
she
Yeah.
looked at that in a pile and went, what am I doing here? And I said, I don't know. You have to make that decision. I said, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm asking you questions to help you come to that conclusion yourself. Now, I don't know if she finally left, but man, in looking at that in black and white on the paper, how unfulfilled she was and being abused on top of it,
Mhm.
it's hard to deny that stuff. Her emotions couldn't argue with that at that point.
Yeah. Well, and I know, for a lot of the bigger life decisions, you know, uh, it can be hard. I mean, we want to sit on the fence, and we know that, with every decision, there's consequences. And sometimes we look at it and we think, man, I don't really want to go through that.
Yeah.
Right. So it was, like me with my last marriage, divorce, right? It's just like, I really don't want to start over again.
Yep.
And so for years, I kind of had this, man, I don't really want to start over again. I've done this how many times in my life? I don't want to do this again.
Yep.
But, again, I kept sitting with it and kind of narrowed it down to, what are the right questions to ask too.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes, in making a decision, we have to be asking the right question. And
Mm.
so, like that with my last relationship, I sat with that for many months trying to figure out what really is the right question to ask on should I stay or should I go,
Mhm.
right? And when I finally figured out what the right answer was, I still couldn't kind of get the answer myself. I wasn't feeling or had the confirmation. And so I talked with my mentor and kind of asked the right question, right? And he looked at me and he's like, no. And the minute that he said that, it's like that woman. It was the answer that I wanted to hear or knew that I already kind of knew was the
Yep.
right answer, but I didn't have the courage to admit it.
Yeah.
And when he said that, I mean, I broke down, I started bawling, and I felt this lightness, on me. And it's like, okay, well, that decision is made. I'm leaving.
Yep.
And then the next question was, I think I need to move physically, but where do I move physically to? Is it some other place in LA? Is it somewhere else in the country? Is it outside of the country? Where is it? And it was the same thing. I was having a hard time kind of getting that, but I got the first answer, right, when I talked to him. Later that evening, right, as I'm kind of contemplating and doing stuff, I get up and move around, and all of a sudden, literally, it was like this electric energy flow all the way through my body. And it's like, there's your answer. And I'm like, fuck, okay, got it. Right. And I knew exactly what I needed to do at that point.
Wow.
But I couldn't answer that second question until I kind of had the first question answered too.
Yep.
Right. But it was sometimes we have to wait for the answers a little bit, and that's often the better course of action. Now there's two sides of it, right? Because again, you can just make quick decisions, and if it's the wrong decision, you make a different one.
Correct.
But if it's a major life decision, like, do I stay in the relationship? Do I
Yeah.
go? I wouldn't necessarily suggest that.
Yeah, you can't often undo that one.
No, but
Yeah.
do I buy chicken or beef this week?
Yeah, which restaurant?
Right.
What do I get at Bob's Big Boy? It's like, just
Yeah,
make the
it doesn't really matter. Those kind of things, those decisions probably don't matter. And again, if you make a wrong decision, then you just don't do it again next time, right? Those have much less of a consequence than some of these bigger things.
Yeah. One of the books that I had to read for school, for the psychedelic program that I'm finishing up, and I don't remember which book I've got a house full of books, but one of the things it was talking about was making decisions and making big life decisions, and how we often agonize over these things that don't need to be made. And the author of this book was talking about how to quickly make these decisions from like subconscious, basically. And he was out to lunch with a friend, and the menu came, and the guy went, okay, so let me know when you are ready to order. And his friend went, wait, you know what you want already? And he goes, yeah. And he goes, have you ever been here before? And he goes, no. It's not like I'm here all the time and I know what I want. I made a choice. And the friend was baffled.
Mhm.
He's like, how did you do that fast? And he said, I tell you, 90% of the time, I love my meal. It is rare I'm unhappy with it. And in that 10%, it's still good. Maybe something could have been better. Okay, maybe. And he said, by practicing little things like that, like making those snap decisions, you do it, you pick it, then the big decisions start to become easier.
Mhm.
Because you're used to making it. And that's how I am with menus. I glance and I'm like, oh, I know.
Yep.
Could there have been something better on the menu? Maybe, but what I just picked was great. So it's like, that's a great way to practice decision making.
Yeah.
And we do have, of course I can't remember the name of this book either. I'm losing. I think I'm losing it, Jason.
We're just getting older.
We're just getting old. I don't know. It's the hat. It's just squishing everything. But it was talking about decision fatigue, and it said, we are this teeny little writer. That's our conscious, our like linear brain, and we're on this giant elephant, which is the emotional part of us. And throughout the course of the day, we're making these decisions and we're riding the elephant, and eventually the elephant gets tired of being led all over the place, and the elephant sort of revolts and just starts to run through and grab the ice cream and make the bad decision, because it's exhausted. And this poor little man, this rider, can't control the elephant anymore. And it was this whole book about making decisions and leading with kind of conscious leadership. And it was but it was such a great example, which is why I said earlier you shouldn't go to the grocery store at the end of the day.
When you're tired.
By that, your elephant is taken over and you can't possibly, do these things. And it had all these great examples about people putting protocols into place to make decisions easier. Things like paper towel holders and things at gas stations. I mean, all these incredible examples of making opportunities for yourself to make those decisions easier. So try to put some of those things in play. And before I edit this episode, I'll find that book and put the title down, because it was the whole elephant rider thing was a really great business book. It was a really great book.
Yeah, and I think it's, that's a great way of kind of, I mean, just like anything in life, we just got to practice.
Oh,
And
100%.
so if you practice just making some of those, smaller decisions like that quicker, and realizing you can always make a different choice, right? You can
Yes.
always make a different choice. And we brought up the idea of decision fatigue a few times too, and again, that's why there are a lot of things that you can do in your life to reduce the decision fatigue, right?
Mhm.
So little things that don't really matter, right? Even like, what do I wear today? Right? I mean, there's the whole story. Steve Jobs, he wore the same. There's a couple of reasons why he wore that black turtleneck and jeans
Right.
almost for years and years and years and years. There's a story behind it because the guy who made the shirts sent him like 100 of them, and Steve's like, "What the hell am I going to do with 100 shirts?" Right? So he just started wearing them, but it was a way of reducing decision fatigue for him. And so you see
Yeah.
this a lot in people who are very busy, CEOs,
Yep.
heads of state, things like that. There's little decisions like that they just kind of give over to somebody else, or they
Mm,
just don't worry about. They just wear the same thing every day. It doesn't matter what I wear, right?
right.
For me, it's like, yeah, I show up. This is my favorite sweater. So when it's cold out, you're probably going to see me wearing this, right? Because I
Yeah.
don't even think about it. And I just tend to grab whatever's on the top of my pile. So I tend to wear the same two or three things all the
Yep.
time, right? But that's a way for me to not have to worry about those kinds of decisions as well, right?
Yeah.
Is it reduces that so I can spend my energy more on making the decisions that I need to make.
Yep.
And kind of the other side of it is, for a lot of the decisions, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, whether you order, the fillet, or if you order the salmon on the menu. It doesn't matter
Yep.
really. And so we end up wasting a lot of time and energy on that. Even some of the bigger things, should I go back to school or should I not? Well, I don't know. If you want to go back to school, go back to school. It doesn't matter whether you do or not. It's not
Right.
like your whole life hinges on this particular thing, right? And I think we're so worried that we're going to make the wrong choice
100%. Yep.
that we don't make a choice, but not making a choice
Is making a
is a
choice.
choice, right? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say that same thing. Yeah, and we put so much pressure on ourselves, and other than kids and tattoos, and one of those is negligible. There's not a lot of decisions that you can't undo. I'll let you decide which one. Um, so yeah, so write the pros and cons. Talk to a trusted person. Flip a coin. That is just seriously one of my favorite techniques, because it really does tell you what your true desire is. And then I remember when I was debating about leaving my ex-husband, there's a book called Too Good to Leave, Too Bad to Stay.
Mm.
And it was the same thing. It's like, when it's good, it's great. When it's bad, it's blah. And which are you getting every moment of the day? And for so long, I was like, I'm leaving, and then everything would be good for a while. That was the cycle, right? And then I'd be like, oh, it's terrible again, I'm going to leave, and then it would get good again. And it was like, it was exhausting to be pulled in two different directions for so long. And the night I decided to go, it was the most liberating feeling I ever had. I could feel all this weight lifted off my body.
Yeah.
So, you'll feel better once you make that decision. And I understand they're so difficult. It was not an easy decision. It took me years. And just like you said, it takes you years sometimes to make these decisions.
Yeah. I mean, there's most of my major life decisions, it hasn't been I'm getting better at it. I'm
Mm,
getting quicker a lot of times because, again, I'm tuning in more for what my higher self really needs, instead of just trying to think
yeah.
about it from in this 3D kind of space. But it does, and I'm still learning, how to do it as well. And I think, that point that you brought up with that title of the book is, so much of the time too, we kind of settle for good or okay
Yeah. It's good
when
enough.
when we could have great. too. And I think sometimes that's one of the things, because subconsciously we're kind of afraid of that opportunity loss, of I'm going to give up something that's
Right.
okay or good. And if I'm gonna give that up, what's gonna happen?
What if there's
And
nothing better?
yeah, but what's interesting, and again, this goes back to my mentor, is so many, I've heard him say this so many times to myself and to other people that are around him, where they'll kind of say something like, yeah, but I'm not really sure, what's going to happen, are things going to be better, or are they going to be worse, kind of thing. And he's like, well, I think it's probably going to be pretty amazing, whatever you decide, kind of a thing. We don't need to worry necessarily about it. It's just like, just go for it, because,
Yeah.
it's going to be uh, pretty great. And so we can stop kind of settling for good and really go for the great,
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
So,
I
because
agree.
again, just like with you, right? I mean, you're getting married here shortly. You're in a wonderful relationship with a
Yeah.
wonderful guy, and you wouldn't have that if you hadn't given up the kind of good to bad, back and forth little thing that you had in your past relationship. So,
Yeah. And it was probably we just hit 4.5 years. Seems crazy, but about 2 years ago, probably, I was, kind of beating myself for why didn't I go sooner, and why didn't I leave sooner, and why did I put up with this, and da da da. And my partner said, well, you've always said that if you guys split up, you wanted to leave Santa Barbara. And I said, yeah, I probably would have headed back to LA. And he goes, okay, so had you left 4 or 5 years ago, you and I wouldn't have met. You'd probably either be with somebody else already, or you would have left Santa Barbara and I would never have met you. And I'm like, yeah. I mean, again, it is that like hindsight, not justification, but like, kind of justification of what could be considered just chaos. But if those things are preordained, which I kind of believe they are, I truly believe that Eric and I were meant to be together. And that wouldn't have happened had I left 5, 6 years ago. So,
well, and that's why I think too, because I'll do the same thing sometimes. I'll kind of beat myself up too, like, why didn't I see this sooner? Because I wasn't supposed to see it sooner.
right. Because you
I
didn't.
was supposed to learn whatever I was supposed to learn. I was supposed to hang out or do something, longer for some reason as well. I mean, there's some learning or some growth in that whole process too. And
Yep.
so instead of beating ourselves up about it, just realize that, yeah, everything does kind of unfold exactly the way it's supposed to.
Yeah. Or let me throw a sort of a spiritual wrench in that. Or we were there so the other person could finish some sort of learning.
Correct. Yeah, because
Somehow
it goes on both sides. Both
somehow the
sides too.
timing was there so that maybe they could be learning a lesson, or give them an opportunity to grow, or we don't know.
Mhm.
I'm looking for
And
that.
we don't have to know either,
No,
which is the nice thing.
I'm looking for that life handbook that I was given when I was born, and I can't find it.
You were given a handbook?
Weren't you given a handbook on how this whole
No.
planet thing works?
No.
Shit, I gotta find that.
I
have so many books.
didn't get one when I came here. I didn't get one when I became a dad either, right? It's
Oh, I don't
yeah,
have that
no,
one. I can't help you with that.
yeah. So anyway, we
Anyway,
just got to figure it out along the way.
oh man, I should have written it all down. Okay, I'll start now. All right, I'm Kathy Gruber. I can be reached at kathygruber.coach.
And I'm Jason Mefford. I can be reached at jasonmefford.com. So go out, have a great rest of your week, and make some decisions. And we'll catch you on the next episode. So see you later.